it's like the famous story that there's many Hasidus in where there's Machlokes, who's the real Rebbe, but one of the real nice examples of brothers is that Menachem Stefke Rebbe. There were two brothers. One was in Israel, one was in America. I think one of them still alive, and both shuls say Tachas Messias Kavod Kedishas Ad Moirim Shlita. So they were working together. So, but all the other Hasidus in this fight who the Rebbe is. So once like let's pick Baba. Once a Baba was speaking to Menachem Stefke Chuzid, and he asked, how many Rebbes do you have by you? He said, by us we have two Rebbes. Nebuch Machlokes. By us we only have one Rebbe. Because each one says their Rebbe is the only Rebbe. Okay, so let's just quickly review what we learned yesterday. Yesterday, we were introduced to a new concept of Tam Ke'ikr. So just to summarize what we learned yesterday, and to keep it very, very simple, is relative to Nazir, it says Mishras Anovim, and there's a question: what is the limud from the pasuk of Mishras Anovim? Is the limud from Mishras Anovim that heter mitzdaref le'iser? If you dip bread into wine, and if you combine the volume of the bread and the wine, you'll reach the sum total of a kazayis, then there's the Isser Nazir. That's one option to learn, and we said that's Rabbi Kiva. However, the Rabbanan held that what we learn from Mishras is not that heter mitzdaref le'iser. That's a bigger chiddush that we don't say. We don't say it by Nazir, that is, nor anywhere else in the Torah. What we learn from Mishras is that tam is ke'ikr, which means if the bread is saturated with the taste of wine, well, then that tam is ke'ikr, and therefore the bread has a status of Isser. In our world, it would be much simpler. If I cooked a piece of treifa meat together with two pieces of kosher meat, and then I remove the piece of treifa meat from the pot, so there's zero treifa meat here, I'm still not allowed to eat the kosher meat because the kosher meat is now saturated with the taste of the treifa meat. So the sum total of it was as follows. Everybody agrees that Tam Ke'ikr applies b'chala Torah kula. The whole question is, what is the source of Tam Ke'ikr? According to the Rabbanan, the source of Tam Ke'ikr is Nazir, Mishras Anovim. According to Rabbi Kiva, we know Tam Ke'ikr from Ge'ulei Nachrim, from the fact that the Rebbeinu Shalom said that after you capture the Kalim from Midian in the war, you have to capture them before you could use them. That teaches us that Belios, which is Tam, is Isser. And that's how we know the Chala Torah Kula. So we don't need Mishras by Nazir to teach us that, because that's a universal rule. So therefore, the extra pasuk Mishras is telling you that by Nazir and Nazir alone, there's an additional chumrah of heter mitzaref le'isser. Then we ran into the chatos yesterday, and that is that anything that absorbs juice, fluid, taste from the meat of a korban chatos has the same status as a korban chatos, and that Tosfos explained to us isn't merely tam ke'ikr, it's also heter mitzaref le'isser, because even if you had a half a kezayis of shlomim that absorb the juices of a half a kezayis of chatos, that would also be usher to eat just like a korban chatos. It would be limited to be eaten just with the restrictions of a korban chatos. I mean, only to a kohen, only the azara, only for the day it was shechted and the night afterwards. So everybody does agree that by the korban chatos, if any other meat absorbs the juice of a korban chatos, everybody agrees that there you do say heter mitzaref le'isser. The question is if you also apply that to Nazir, and Tam Ke'ikr, it's universal that it applies b'chol haTorah kula. And that takes us to 4 lines from the bottom of Daf Lamed Zayin Amud Beis. Omer le Rab Ashi l'Rav Kahana elahadu Tanya mikol asher yasa migefen hayayin. So this is a pasuk in the parsha of Nazir. Let's see it inside. Kol Yemei Nizroi, Mikoil Asher Yasa, Migefen Hayayin, Michartanim Vadzag Lo Yoichal. So if you remember, this was the klal after the prat. Mikol Asher Yasa, Migefen Hayayin, and the Michartanim Vadzag. Remember, we had a shaila between Rabbi Lozer, who holds this is not connected to the previous sequence, and he learns two Chartanim and one Zag has to be eaten in order to violate. And then we had the Shita Chachamim, who held Michartanim Vadzag was the final prat in the sequence of a prat, klalu prat. So it says in the Bryson, Mikol Asher Yasa, Migefen Hayayin. Zog to Bach. Mechartanim Vadzag, Limed, it teaches us, Al Yisurei Nazir, Shei Mitztarfin Zemzeh. So we have another limud. We have another limud that if you have the different things of a Nazir, for instance, you have some seeds, and you have some peel, and you have some pulp. You don't have a kazayis of either one individually, but if you combine the volume of all these different components that are each prohibited by the Torah for a Nazir, that also would constitute an Isser. Limud al Isuri Nazir Shemitztarfen Zemzeh. Frek the Gemara. Rabbi Kiva said Heter's Mitztarf Isser. Meaning, if I had bread that was combined with the grape, that would also be considered Isser. So Hashtu Yesh Loimer Heter Mitztarf Isser is Isser. I'm sorry, Heter Mitztarf Isser. Even Heter's Mitztarf Isser, like Rabbi Kiva learned from Mishras, that even Heter's Mitztarf Isser. Do I need a pasuk to tell me Isser le'Isser mivoy? If bread is mitzaref to the kazayis of what a nazir is prohibited to eat, surely pieces of grape, seeds, shell, skin, surely that should contribute to the Isser, because even non-Isser contributes. So what is this limud that the Gemara teaches us from Michartanim Vadzag, that all of the different types of prohibited items combine to a kazayis? Everything combines to a kazayis, even heter. Omer lei, so the Gemara answers, so Rav Kahana answers as follows. Heter le'isser bivasachas. No one's going to suggest that you can have half a slice of bread, pause, then have a half a grape, and that would be us. Of course not. When the bread is mixed in with the wine, then the bread combines to make the isser. But if you ate them separately, of course they wouldn't work. But an isser le'isser, if I'm eating a kazayis that's composed of multiple parts, seeds and some skin and pulp, there I can even eat them not together. I can even eat them one at a time. Isser le'isser, afilu b'zar chazeh. Even if I eat them one at a time, of course, Tosha speaks out, ubelvachi hey, b'toich kadeh chilas pras, they will also combine. When I say you're even allowed to eat them, I mean you're even not allowed to eat them. If you ate them a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of that, there would be a chiv malchus. So could be that would be a problem. Could be it would be a problem because that would be together. But eating it separately with small pauses, just not the pause of achilas pras, that would combine for things that are also. So now we learn a new rule. Heter mitzaref l'isser only if you're eating them simultaneously. Isser mitzaref l'isser as long as you're eating them all, as long as you're consuming the entire kazayis within a span of achilas pras. Zog to Gemara Vayter. Rab Shimon the less late tziruf. Rab Shimon does not hold of tziruf. What does that mean? Rab Shimon does not hold of tziruf. Zog Tosfos Klemer loy boy tziruf. Rab Shimon says you never need to combine different components to comprise a kazayis. You know why? The istlay kol shehula makas. Rab Shimon holds b'chol Torah kula. There is no such thing as a share of a kazayis. You're not allowed to eat chazer. If you eat a tidbit of chazer, you'll get malchus. So according to Rab Shimon, you never need tziruf. So if you never need tziruf, we call asher yasa, excuse me, my darish bay. We just brought a drasha that different parts of the prohibition, whether it's seeds, skins, pulp, they all combine to a kazayis. I don't need any combination because any minute amount that you eat is usher by itself, right? You're looking at me like I said something wrong. Make sense? Okay, so that teaches you something else. That he argues, in fact, you don't learn from that Ishus Mitzaref. because in fact tziruf is not necessary. He uses that to teach us something else, something that we learned all the way at the beginning of Masechta. What if somebody says, I want to be a Nazir, but only from Yayin, not from Tumah, or only from Tumah, not from Yayin? He picks and chooses, he cherry picks parts of the Naziris that he wants. According to Reb Shimon, that's not a Nazir. Until he is Mikol Sheyasa, Mechatzan Vadzag, the Naziris is only a Kabbalas Naziris if you accept it in full. On the other hand, we learned that the Tanna Kama held that if you even are Makabel part of the Naziris, it automatically takes hold and morphs into a full Naziris. Amar Bo, Amar Belozer. Now we're going to learn general rules about the Torah, about Reviis, about the Shir Reviis. Now we learned in our Mishnah that the Mishnah Acharayna holds that in order for you to violate a prohibition of wine by Naziris, you have to have a kezayis of wine. While the Mishnah Rishayna said you have to drink a Reviis of wine. So based on the Mishnah Rishayna that you have to drink a Reviis of wine, Omer Abavo, Omer Abalozer. Yes, kezayis is normally a measurement of an oichel. So what is the shaila about? We're going to get into that a little bit later. But if we look at the pasuk that discusses this, it says over here, miyayin v'shecher yazir, choymetz yayin v'choymetz shecher lo yishte, and then it says v'chol mishros another lo yishte, v'anov va with a vav, which is mechaber this va'novim to the earlier part of the pasuk, va'novim lachem v'yaveshim lo yoichel. So there are those who learn that since this va'novim is connecting to the earlier prohibition of shtia, and it uses the word lo yoichel, we use the shir of kezayis, which is normally reserved for Michael. We use it even for the shir of mishta, which is prohibited by a nazir. And that's what the shaila is about. That's what the shaila is about, whether or not you need to drink a revius, as in the Mishnah Rishayna, versus kezayis, which is the Mishnah Acharayna, and of course kezayis is a chumrah, because kezayis is a smaller shear than the revius. So if you remember, a couple of days ago we had Amar Abavo, Amar B'Yochanan. He told us the only time you say heter mitzaref le'iser is only by the kezayis of a nazir. Now Rabbi Vo said in the name of Rabbi Lozer, called Reviis B'Torah. So now he's not talking about kezaysim, he's talking about revius, and ein heter mitzaref le'iser chutz m'revius shebenazir. Shari Amar Torah Mishras. So this is the same limit as before, but it's not applying to a kezayis, it's applying to revius. Ma'ika ben Rabbi Yochanan, between Rabbi Yochanan, who Rabbi Vo quoted a couple of days ago, versus Rabbi Lozer, who Rabbi Vo is quoting now. Rabbi Yochanan is applying this halacha of heter mitzaref le'iser even by oichel. Rabbi Lozer mashkenin midei achrin loy. Why is it a lesser chiddush to say heter mitzaref le'iser by a mashke versus an oichel? And the answer is it's quite logical. What mix is better, liquids or solids? Surely liquids. So it's more mistaber to say that when you mix the water into the concentrated orange juice, it becomes one thing. Who remembers that? Okay. Rabbi Lozer. Zok Rabbi Lozer. Eser Reviisin. There's 10 Reviisin that are discussed in the Torah. And in fact, there's many more than that, but we're limiting it to a certain set of Reviis that will come out as we learn the Gemara. V'nakad Rav Kahana b'yodei, and Rav Kahana created something to help him memorize these 10 Reviisin, that Chamesh Sumkasa, 5 of these Reviisin are red, so they're referring to wine or even to blood. The Chamesh Chivata, and 5 of them are white, such as oil or water or some other clear-like liquid. So let's first itemize the Chamesh Sumkasa. And they're represented by these 5 code words. Nazir, the Oisa Pesach, Shehoiru, B'mikdash, V'mesu. These 5 items. Nazir is referring to Reviis Yayin LeNazir. Nazir is referring to the prohibition for a Nazir to drink a Revius wine, clearly like the Mishnah Rishayna. Oisa Pesach. What is the case of Oisa Pesach? The Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Arba koises halalu sarach shiyeh bahen kidei revius. The red wine that we drink on Pesach, the 4 koises, each one should have a revius. The third revius discussed is shahayru. What does that mean? Shasa revius yain al yoyra. Someone who's a person who drank a revius of wine, he should no longer engage in psak. He's drank too much to have a clear enough mind to paskin shaylas. B'mikdash, what does that mean? That shasa revius yain v'nichnas l'mikdash chayiv misa. If one drank a revius of wine and then went into the Beis HaMikdash, he's chayiv misa. One is not allowed to enter the Beis HaMikdash after drinking wine. V'mesu, the Tanya, that's no longer referring to red wine, it's referring to red blood. Now the halacha is, a revius of dam that comes out of a mace is mitama b'oil. It's like a full mace. But how do you know minayin the revius dam sheyoytza mishnei mesim shemitama b'oil? What if you don't have a revius dam of one mace? There's 2 mesim, and combined, the blood combined that we have in this room from both these mesim is a total of a revius. That will also be mitama b'oil. So anything that's in the same oil as this blood will also become tumas mace. Shenemar v'alkol nafshois mace lo yavoy. The nafshois is plural, the mace is singular. So even if I have 1 revius from 2 mesim, lo yavoy is still going to create it. Let's see Tosfos inside. Alkol nafshois mace lo yavoy. Nefashos is mashma trei, umace mashma shirecha. So that means v'hu revius dam shenefesh tolubay. It's a revius dam combined from the 2 mesim, and that's going to create a tumas oil. So those are the 5 reviusin that are red. The chomesh chivarta. What about the 5 white reviusin? You have chalas nazir, umitzayra, shenifsalu, b'shabbos. Oh, yeah, it's chalas, it's nazir, it's mitzayra, it's shenifsalu, and it's b'shabbos. So each one of these words represents an example of a revius. Let's see what the first one is. Chalas, revius, that means shemen lachala. What is shemen lachala? Oil for bread. So Tosfos tells us, chalas revius shemen is b'chalois toida mari. When someone brings a carbon toida, he brings 50 chalois, 5 different types, 10 of each type. Out of these 50 matzahs, 30 of them were matzah, were not chometz, and asara chalois, vasara vuchin, vasara rikikin. The 3 different styles of preparation for the 3 different types of breads that were matzah was called chalois, revuchin, and rikikin. It's different ways of preparing it, either fried or cooked or deep fried. With the unen chatzi lug, and they require a half a lug. The amar v'chaytzeyu, you take this half a lug and you split it in half. Chetzi l'rikikin u'lachalois v'chetzi l'revucha. So half of the half a lug and half of a half a lug, which is a quarter of a lug, is a revius. So 1 revius was dedicated to the 10 breads that were revucha, and 1 revius was dedicated to the 20 breads that were rikikin and were chalos. Interesting to note that the carbon toida is really like a carbon shlomim on steroids. Yet a carbon shlomim, you have 2 days and 1 night to eat it, while the carbon toida is limited to be eaten in 1 day and 1 night. What's the reason for it? Plus, the carbon toida has a lot more food that needs to be eaten because there's also 50 breads. So the Mepharshim tell us, what is the purpose of a carbon toida? It's because someone wants to thank the Rebbeinu Shalom for a Yeshua that he received. The Rebbeinu Shalom wants that to be a big party, not a small party. So therefore, Hashem made that you should have a lot of meat and a lot of bread and very little time to eat it. You know what that means? You need to invite a lot of guests to the party. So therefore, Hashem B'davka made it that way. So when someone is thanking the Rebbeinu Shalom and the Mefarshim and Nes that he experienced, it's with big fanfare, with a big party. Gewaltig. See, in those days, they didn't have to converse about the maximum you can give by a Kiddush. They had to converse about the minimum you have to give for a Kiddush, because they wanted to make sure that it would be a big party. Actually, it was also a maximum. It was a prescribed Kiddush. Everyone stuck to the same recipe. Right now, if someone gives Kiddush, he has something good in his life, it's arbitrary. Everyone can give what they want. In those days, it was much more regimented what each person had to give. Okay, so let's see the Mefarish, because the Mefarish does not learn that the Reviis that we're referring to is the Reviis of the Korban Toida. Rather, he says it's referring to the Minchas Chavitin. Every day the Kohen Gadol brought a mincha, and the flour that he brought was split, and half of it was brought in the morning, and half of it was brought in the afternoon, and each one had to be brought with a revius. So I'm just going to look into the intermediate lines of the Mefarish, and he said, Amar Abchia lechavite Kohen Gadol, the maybe b'chol yoim, ba'osu ba'yud beis chalois, he would make 12 chalois with the flour and oil that he brought. Machtzitza b'boiker, machtzitza b'erev. 6 were brought in the morning, 6 were brought in the afternoon. But you maybe revius shemen, and you would bring a revius shemen. So the revius of shemen that our sugya is discussing is that revius. Okay, let's see the next one. Nazir, revius shemen l'nazir. It's referring to the revius shemen that a nazir brings, and again, Tosfos tells us shnei minin chalosh urikikin. There's 2 types of breads that the nazir brings during his discharge ceremony, and there's the revius brought with them. Mitzayra is revius maim l'mitzayra. They need a revius maim by the mitzayra. What is this revius maim used for? Zok Tosfos. The Chsivit says in the pasuk, "V'tovel oisam v'satzipor hachaya v'dam hatzipor hashchuta al hamayim hachayim." They dipped. They used to make a little brush out of a grass bundle that they prepared, and they dipped it into mayim chayim. How much mayim chayim was required? Revius. So that's the 3rd white revius, and shenivsalu is the tnan v'shar kol hamashkin tameim postel nasakvia b'revius. The halacha is mashke is if it's only tamei midrabanan, which it is, how much of it does one have to drink to become tamei? Because normally a mashke could not be matama a person. It's tumas oichlin. It's too low a level of tumah. But they made a gzera that if you drink a revius of mashkim tamein, you'll become tamei. And b'Shabbos, what is that referring to? It's not we learned how much mashke do you have to carry to be considered carrying. Let's say you wash your hands and you didn't dry, there's a drop of water on your finger. So if you walk out in Rosh Hashanah, you're not going to be chayiv. That's not called carrying. There has to be a certain amount of critical mass. How much is that? It's now we learned b'shar kol hamashkim b'revius, b'shar kol hashayvchim b'revius. So whether it's clean water or dirty water, it's a revius of water that's considered enough of a volume that you're over for carrying it. Frek the Gemara, v'suleka, are there no other things that have the share of a revius? There's a share of a revius, which is the minimum share that you need to wash. And the Brisa says that a revius not only you can use to wash one person's hands, it can be used to wash 2 people's hands. And for the Gemara, you know why that's not in our list? Because beplukta loy kamairi. There is a machlokes there. What we just quoted was one shita, but there's other shitas that hold that I think a revius is only good for one person. So reviusin that are under dispute, that's not what we considered in this list of 10 revius. When they were preparing the mayim hama'orim for the soita to drink, they took a keli made out of earthenware, and they took a half a loig of water from the kiyar. Rabbi Yehuda a revius, and Rabbi Yehuda said it was a revius, so why can't we use Rabbi Yehuda's revius to the list, add it to the list? Once again, the plukta lekamari, because you see clearly that the Tanakama of Rabbi Yehuda held it's 2 revius. Frank the Gemara, va'ika kama mayim noisin l'soicha kol shehu. If there is meir aglayim which you're not allowed to daven in front of, you have to dilute it. How much water do you have to dilute it with? The Tanakama says kol shehu, just a little bit. Zakayam revius. So you have a revius there as well. Once again, the plukta lekamari, we're not going to add things to the list that are subject to machlokes. Frank the Gemara, va'ika mikvah. Did you ever hear of a mikvah that you can use as a revius? So Tosfos tells us there was a takana that ended this practice, but originally small kalim were able to tovel in just a small amount of water, a revius. If I have to tovel a needle, some small item, I don't need a huge mikvah. So that's a revius, a shear we can use. The Bar Me'ahi, the Batlu Rabbanon. The Rabbanon said you can no longer toivel small kalim in the Reviis, they also need 40 saw, which is how we paskin. Although Tosfos tells us at the top of our base, that's for a mikveh. The minimum shear for a mikveh, even the toivel, the smallest of kalim, is 40 saw. However, if you have a ma'ayin, if you have a spring, there you would be able to toivel small kalim, even in a smaller shear than 40 saw, even in the Reviis. Zok to Gemara, it's actually not a Reviis. If you look at the top line, the Tosfos, even a tiny drop of spring water can be used to toivel. I'm sorry? I think so, but we don't have our mikvahs. Zok to Gemara. We're finished the sugya. Now we're starting a new sugya, which is continuing on to explain the Mishnah. Ben Chayv at Sheyochel min Hanovim Kizayis. Zok to Gemara. Our Kela mikveh does have 40 saw. Yes, our Kela mikveh is actually, if I'm not mistaken, our Kela mikveh is the actual 40 saw, the actual rainwater of 40 saw. If I'm not mistaken, the Kela mikveh is the actual 40 saw of rainwater that's used to be machshir our regular mikveh. I'm not sure. The truth of the matter is, I might be mistaken because in between the Kela mikveh and our mikveh, there's about 8 to 10 feet of dressing room area. So there's probably a bar underneath there as well. So I'm probably mistaken. So Zok to Gemara, Tanakama loy medama lahoin l'chol isurei nazir l'shtiyah. The Tanakama said, let's have a look at our Mishnah so we have some clarity. Let's just have a quick look at our Mishnah over here, where it talks about here we are, Mishnah. So let me just quickly look at what it says in our Mishnah. It says in our Mishnah, the Ein Chayv at Sheyochel min Hanovim Kazayis. Right, that's what we're quoting to start our sugya. And then after that, it says Mishnah Rishono Imeres at Sheyishter Reviis Right. So it sounds from here that halacha l'maisa we paskin like the first part of the Mishnah, which is ve'inei chayv at sheyochel min hanovim kazayis. And then after it says, oh, by the way, in the olden days, the Mishnah Rishono said Reviis, which is not typical. Normally, you would quote the Mishnah Rishono first. So Zok to Gemara, Tanakama loy medama lehu l'chol isurei nazir. Why? So the Farish tells us the ilu anovim b'chazayis b'yayin b'Reviis. I'm sorry, I looked at the Farish. I want to look at places. Ve'inei chayv at sheyochel min hanovim kazayis, but who adin b'shtiyah? In the Tanakama that says that you're not chayv until you eat a kazayis of a novim, shtiyah as well, you only have to drink a kazayis. V'hainu kamishna achroina ucha Rabbi Kiva de b'samach. So, Nachamo, Tanakama, loy medama lahoin l'chol isurei nazir l'shtiyah. We don't compare the isurei nazir l'shtiyah. Rather, we compare it all to achila, and we say that it's a shear of a kazayis. Rabbi Kiva, Kivan dechsiv v'anovim lachem v'yiveshim lo yoichal. Since it says anovim lachem v'yiveshim lo yoichal, ma achila kazayis af kol isurim kazayis. Just like achila is a kazayis, so to all of the isurim are kazayis. Because let me just read Rabbi Kiva the Mishnah again, so we see the flow. After the Tana quoted in the Mishnah Rishono Sheyishter Reviis Right, it says Rabbi Kiva Omer Filushar Pita B'Yayin V'Yishbor Kedei Tzarf Kazayis Chayim. So let's see what's going on over here. Let's see the Tosfos again. Ve'inei chayv at sheyochel min hanovim kazayis v'udem b'shtiyah. V'hainu k'mishnah achroina ucha Rabbi Kiva ben Tzomach, who said it's only a kazayis, even with the kazayis you will be over. Mishnah Rishono at Sheyishter Reviis Right. Pirish. V'hu adin la'achila b'Reviis. The Mishnah Rishono holds that both the violation for drinking as well as for eating will be a Reviis. Ushtia b'chazayis kated mishayim. So how do you calculate a kazayis when it comes to drinking? How do you know how much is the volume of a kazayis? So we use displacement. Mavin zayis aguri. You bring a nice fat olive, v'shoykei b'kois malayayin, and you drop it into a becher full of wine, which means the wine will now overflow the amount that the olive has displaced it. Now, how do you get achila b'reviis? You take the amount of grapes that he ate, you put them into a kosh full of water, and then once again it'll spill over. If a reviis of wine pours over, meaning if the grapes that he ate displaced a reviis of yain, hooray, achal reviis. So zog toisves the kosher l'reveyatam al pirush. This pirush is a little bit shverlich because we first start talking about the Mishnah. We're first talking about the Mishnah Achrona, which is Tanakama lo medama lahoy l'chol Yisur Nazir l'shtia. The Tanakama says we don't compare it to shtia, we compare it to achila, and it starts off with the kazayis. Then it goes into a Mishnah Rishona. And discusses revius. That's out of order. So that's Tosfos' difficulty with the reading of our Gemara. V'ayid kasha. The mitchila nakat kazayis. The eine Mishnah Achrona. Kirab Akiva. Umavsik ba b'Mishnah Rishona. And then in the middle, it interjects. The Mishnah injects the sheet of the Mishnah Rishona, which says you need to have a revius. And then v'shuv chayzer loimer divrei Akiva shuk Mishnah Achrona. That doesn't make sense. So because of that, Tosfos wants to learn a little differently. I'm on the second intermediate line. The first clause in the Mishnah on Lamadal and Amar Aleph that said you're not chayiv until you have a kazayis of grapes. That even applies to the Mishnah Rishona. So Tosfos wants to say that that even the Mishnah Rishona, who says a revius, that's only for drinking. But the Mishnah Rishona agrees that for eating the shear will still be a kazayis. The Mishnah Rishona actually used the revius kederech kol shasiya. And by achila it's a kazayis. And the Mishnah Achrona says it's all about the shear of drinking. Now that's Rabbi Kiva. For Rabbi Kiva, Kivan dechsiv va'anavim lachem v'yaveshim lo yoichal. So it's that vav of va'anavim that connects the lo yoichal to the earlier parts of the pasuk. Machil b'gazayis av kol yishurim b'gazayis mi va'anavim vav kadorish. The vav of va'anavim, which talks about aloy soichal, connects it to the earlier part of the pasuk, and therefore we say av kol yisuri nazir b'gazayis da'aynu shasiya d'chsiv le'ilminei. Right before it says about Novim Lo Yoichal, it says on Mishras and Novim Lo Yishta, and we're saying that that's connected to the Lo Yoichal to tell us that the shear to violate Naziris is even by drinking a kazayis. The hashav of the Anovim Moisef al de La'il. The vav of Anovim Lo Yoichal is connected to the earlier part of the pasuk that's speaking about Shasiya. The Chihechid Anovim Kazayis, just like the Isser of eating grapes is going to be violated with a mere kazayis. So let's have a look then now at how the Gemara reads. So the Gemara reads as follows. And the way Tosfos is learning, this is even going according to the Tanakama. And he says, Tanakama the Tanakama holds that you don't compare all of the Isuri Nazir l'shtiya. The achila is a kazayis and the shti is a revius. And it's Rabbi Kiva who says, Kiva nechsiv anavim lachem yiveshim lo yochel, ma'achila kazayis av yisurin av kol yisurin kazayis. And it's Rabbi Kiva who is first introducing the Mishnah Achrona that says even drinking will be a kazayis. So let's look at the Mishnah inside so that it becomes clear again. So the Mishnah first says, Ve'ein chayiv atsheyechem anavim kazayis. And the way Tosfos learns, this is even the Mishnah Rishona, because when it comes to eating Isurim, the shears are kazayis, And Mishnah Rishayna Omeres at Yisner Reviis Right, but the drinking requires a share of a Reviis. And Rabbi Kiva, who's representing the Mishnah Acharayna, says, even the drinking of wine is also a share of a kazayis, not of a Reviis. That's how Tosfos learns this Gemara. Zok el Gemara back to the chayiv al yayin b'fnei atzmai. Tanu Rabbanan va'anovim lachem v'yeveshim lo yoichal l'chayiv al zeh b'fnei atzmai v'al zeh b'fnei atzmai, which means eating anovim lachem alone will trigger a chiv malchus, and eating raisins alone will trigger a chiv malchus. Which means that each individual item listed in the pasuk, in and of itself, can bring you a chiv malchus. Therefore, mikanat adan l'chol yisurin shebetayr, and there are those who aren't goyish kol yisurin shebetayr. Tosfos is goyish l'chol yisurei nazir. Mikanat adan l'chol yisurei nazir. From here you learn by all yisurei nazir ma kan shu min echad ven shnei shemois v'chayiv al zeh b'fnei atzmai al zeh b'fnei atzmai. Look at it. If you have a grape or a raisin, it's really the same thing. Yet we refer to a dried grape as a raisin. It's enough that you'll get two malchus, one for the grape, one for the raisin. Afkol shehu min echad ven shnei shemois chayiv al zeh b'fnei atzmai al zeh b'fnei atzmai. Which tells you that if I had grape juice, freshly squeezed grape juice, and I had invi, which are fresh grapes, that's also two yisurim. Technically, they're the same thing, but since they have two shemus, you're going to get a separate malchus for violating each one. Based on that, Amar Abaye, Achal Chartzan Loikishtayim. If someone just eats the seeds of a grape, he gets malchus twice. Why does he get malchus twice? Because it says b'chatan v'zag you shouldn't eat, but there's also a general lav of mikol asher yasa migefen hayayin. So you're actually violating two lavin anytime you're over even one of the isurim here. Ochal zog, if you ate the skin of a grape, like a shtayim. Ochal chartzen, again, ochal chartzen v'zog like a shalosh, because we said earlier for every item in the list you get separate malchus. So you get malchus for the chartzen, you get malchus for the zag, and you get malchus for the mikol asher yasa migefen hayayin. Rav Amar ein lo kalachas. Rav says you only get one malchus for eating the chartzen or the zag, because you don't get malchus for the lav of mikol asher yasa migefen hayayin. Sheina loika alav shebechlovis. Mikol asher yasa migefen hayayin is a general umbrella lav. That does not give you malchus. You only get malchus for a specific lav. So therefore, for each item alone, you get only one set of malchus. Mazav Rav Papa, Rav Papa, Rabbi Lazar Omer, Nazir shayasoy shayayin kol hayoyim. If a Nazir is drinking wine all day long, einoi chayiv elo achas, he'll only be chayiv one lav. Amrulai al tishta. I'm sorry. Correct. Amrulai, exactly. You asked the question just at the right time, because the next thing Rabbi Lazar said is Amrulai al tishta. If they keep on giving him asra, v'ushayis, and he continues to drink, then chayav al kol achas v'achas will get malchus for each asra. What about ochal anovim lachim? 1, v'yeveshim 2, chartzanim 3, zogim 4, and v'sachat eshkol shel anovim b'shasa, and he drank wine. So the halacha is loike chamish. He gets 5 malchus, but he doesn't get the malchus for the mikol asher yasa. So this is shver nabaye. You, Abaye, said you also get malchus for the mikol asher yasa migefen hayayin. Rava argued with you. You see here from this brisa, you only get 5. According to you, Abaye, hachi lil keshes. Why? Achas al mikol asher yasa. So you have a raya against Abaye from this brisa. And for the Gemara, Abaye will say that's not shver on me. Tana v'shayir. The Tana is listing off the lavin that I'm over, and I missed one lav. You're allowed to miss a lav, but you're only allowed to miss a lav if you missed another lav. In other words, if it's not a complete list, you cannot say that if only one thing was pinpointed to be omitted, that it's just agavorcha. It has to be 2. So my shire, the high shire. So tomorrow, shire lo yachel devarai. Every time you violate Naziris, you're also violating the Isser of lo yachel devarai, which is the umbrella lav on all lavin. Zok to Gemara, that's the case, and now it's shver on Rava, because according to Rava, you don't get malchus mikol sheyasa, so that's not left over. But what about lo yachil? Zok to Gemara, imishum ha lav shiri. Rava can say lo yachil is not kol shir. Why? Because kikatani midi lo isi biduchta achriti. Lo yachil devara isi b'dedorim. We're focused here on nizarim, on nazir issues. We're not talking about other lavin that could apply. We're focused here on nazir issues. Now we're going to see a fascinating thing. So we asked the kasha on Abaye. Who asked that kasha? Rav Papa asked the kasha on Abaye from a brisa that says chamesh, right? Correct the Gemara. Amal Ravina mi parzakular Ravashi. What are you talking about? V'shayir the bein habinayim. Is there not another thing that the Mishnah omitted? That there was another thing that he would get malchus for? Because we learned earlier that bein habinayim is those small little grapes that we learned are also listed as a separate thing that you're not allowed to eat. So how come that's not left over? So now we have a huge problem. Ella Amar Papa, look at this. Loi Tanya midi chamesh. It never said chamesh. The brisa that I quoted that says loike chamesh, I lied. It doesn't say loike chamesh. It doesn't say how much. So it was never a kasha on Abaye, and there was never a riot to Rava, because the brisa never even said how many malchus. Frank Gemara, how could you say it doesn't say chamesh? For eisvei chamesh, didn't Rav Papa ask a kasha on Abaye from the fact that he quoted the brisa that says there's 5 lavin, and now you're telling me it doesn't even say that in the brisa? Frank Gemara, me'achad l'tanya chamesh, my time eisvei. Why would you ask a kasha on Abaye from a fabricated brisa? So look, this is unbelievable. Amar Papa, Anna Savri lav Gemara hu b'yadei. I thought that Abaye wasn't really so sure that you get the malchus for Mikol Shiyasa B'Gefen Yayin. I thought it was his own svara, but he doesn't really have a Kabbalah from his Rebbeim. So if I would challenge him, he would back away from it. Therefore, V'Hadar Bey, and he would back away with a challenge, even though I fabricated my raya. V'Lo Yadana, I didn't know the Gemara B'Yadei. Abaye knows his beads, and he was sure of what he was saying. V'Lo Yadar Bey, and he won't back down. So now that he didn't back down, and my challenge didn't work, so the whole thing was fabricated. So this is the Kashmav right. Can you imagine that's how you ask questions? Right? Look what the Torah says. Papa, not sorry, lav gamar b'yadei. L'chein b'deisi milibi. I literally fabricated a brisa to ask a kasha on Abaye, just lirois, just to probe him. In midai toy amra lememra the day he was saying his own thing. The ozbakal yachsim advar. With a small challenge, he would back down. But it turns out he knows what he's talking about. He's not letting you push him around. This is mind-blowing. That's how they brought rayas, just to poke and see how sure you were. I don't know. Okay, let's just finish the last line until the brisa. Rabbi Elizabeth and Zayah Omer, you have to have 2 chachanim on one zag. Rabbi Yosef commandment targuminin mifurtzonin vaditzurin. So there's a targum on the words mechachanim vadzag. Before it'll be Rabbi Yossi because he holds mechatzanim. If tzonim is the hainu hagarinim, it means the seeds. Okay, gavaltik. So we will stop here and we will be mamshich tomorrow. What a concept! You make up a brisa to be able to ask a question just to see are you so sure of yourself. Gavaltik.